Why is Tulsi Gabbard there?
I don't know, but, you know, a lot of the cheating comes from it's international cheating. You have people, they say, from China. We have our director of national and international intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who's doing a great job. Where's Tulsi? She took a lot of heat 2 days ago because she went in at Pam's insistence. She went in and she looked at votes.
President Trump yesterday explaining that Attorney General Pam Bondi sent Tulsi Gabbard to Fulton County, Georgia last week for the FBI's raid of an election office.
That's one take on it.
But on Wednesday, he told NBC News he didn't know why the director of national intelligence was there. The shifting stories.
That's true. There are about 4, 5, 6.
There are several
different stories on why she was actually there. Look at this. I'm seriously, are you guys kidding me? Tulsi Gabbard down in Georgia seizing voting. Are you this stupid?
Picking up the phone.
Are you this stupid that you think you're going to get away with it? Are you this stupid? Why are you so stupid? Why do you do things that hurt Republican candidates in the state of Georgia, hurt Republican candidates across the country, and are always overturned by judges? I've got to say, and you know, Allie's last story was about the president saying, okay, well, we'll give you that funding. We'll restart the funding for desperately needed transportation between New Jersey and New York to help people on both sides of the Hudson be able to commute better. If you rename Dulles Airport and Penn Station, I mean, and seriously, who would want their names on either one of those? Why don't you just ask them to rename the New York Jets after you? I can't imagine it. But again, Jonathan Lemire, the fact is that Donald Trump seizing those funds was one part of Mikey Sherrill winning by like 15 points or 14 points or however many points he won in New Jersey. The Republican candidate was gaining ground. This happened, and then poof, he spent the rest of the campaign talking about that. Now, Jon Ossoff, this is a gift for Jon Ossoff in Georgia. You look at New York State, it's going to be, again, critical for the Democrats taking over the House of Representatives. And here's Donald Trump saying, yeah, I'm going to keep destroying your morning commute, keep you away from your loved ones and your family and your children even longer because you won't rename really two of the worst infrastructure projects in America after me. Again, all of this is so self-defeating, and if you don't believe me, just look at the poll numbers.
Yeah, President Trump telling on himself there, clearly revealing doesn't travel by train very much. Otherwise, he might want to stay clear of having his name splashed on Penn Station.
Exactly.
But you're exactly right. First of all, the Gateway Tunnel, which is what New York and New Jersey officials have wanted for decades, desperately needed link under the Hudson River, helping commuters in both states. And certainly now Governor Sherrill was grateful for that in-kind campaign donation that President Trump made late in that race this last fall, because he took away that funding and in a moment of a fit. And, you know, it was a gift to her because it hurt people in her state. And you're right, though. This is also what Republicans have been saying to me. I wrote about it this week. We've chronicled it a few times now. That President Trump, he's just taking his eye off the ball, they fear. Like, lock in on the economy, lock in on rising prices, like do something about inflation or healthcare costs, whatever it might be, things that voters are likely going to have front of mind this coming November at the midterms. And instead, Trump, first of all, didn't travel this week as his team had promised, these weekly trips to talk about the economy and campaign for Republican officials. But more than that, he seems to really care more about these legacy projects, whether it's the ballroom or the Kennedy Center. He's on a building spree throughout Washington. And Willie, this would be the next, the idea that he would suddenly want to have his name on Dulles and Penn Station, and threatening to keep federal funds away unless that happens helps no one.
I mean, in normal times, this is a massive scandal. The president won't allow a state, a municipality to have funds unless you name something after him. And as you say, you might want to pump the brakes or choose something else on Penn Station, though the new Moynihan Hall is very nice. We'll stipulate that.
It's nice.
But guys, back to Georgia for a second, we don't really have to wonder who directed Tulsi Gabbard to go there, because Tulsi Gabbard wrote in a letter to Congress that it was President Trump himself who ordered her to go to Georgia on that FBI raid. And then you'll recall, after the raid, she called the President of the United States, put him on speakerphone so he could celebrate with the FBI agents who conducted the raid. So there is a pattern, Donald Trump doing something, and then when it goes bad, or the reaction to it, or the polling is bad, say ICE in Minneapolis, for example, he runs from it. And yesterday, as you just showed at the prayer breakfast, said, yeah, that was Pam Bondi who did that, not me.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of the prayer breakfast, there's another extraordinary lost opportunity. Here's something that, I know the people who run it, been a part of it. When I was in Congress, it was a wonderful time, even when Bill Clinton was going through impeachment. I mean, it was we would come together, we would talk, it lessened the tensions. The president, other people would talk about their faith, and it was a good time to come together. Yesterday, you had the president attacking Republicans that voted against him, Thomas Massie especially, attacking Democrats, saying, I don't know why any Christian would vote for Democrats when, in fact, because they oppose me all the time, when, in fact, there are a lot of people that actually were raised in the church asking, why would anybody support so many of these Republican policies that run completely counter to Jesus's direct, unambiguous teaching? You got Mike Johnson, like Christ explaining the Bible to the Pope because the Pope dared to actually quote Jesus's words. You could go on, and then, Willie, Donald Trump's coalition, the Republicans' coalition, is not crumbling from the edges. It's crumbling from the center. He's losing the independents. He's losing, of course, Democrats that may have voted for him. He's losing working Americans that voted for him in the past. And everything he's doing is causing that collapse in the center to continue and drive his numbers and Republican numbers down. And, of course, overnight, he put out a Truth Social post that was a racist post depicting the former president of the United States and First Lady as monkeys, as primates, and that's only going to hurt. They're sitting there thinking, oh, we're going to own the libs. Oh, we're going to make the libs mad. No,
they'll be so triggered.
That's not what happens. I mean, at this stage, all you're doing is hurting the Republican Party. All you're doing is hurting your support in the center. All you're doing is making sure Democrats have a great off-year election. All you're doing is making yourself look pathetic, Republicans, for not standing up to this open racism and bigotry. Again, in normal times, would end somebody's political career that day. And every Republican
or any career
in normal times would have come out and attacked this racism and this bigotry. But the thing is, they think Democrats are going to get angry. Now Democrats just look at it and they're staring at the Republicans going, really? You're not going to say anything about this? Because this doesn't own the libs. This destroys, it's just all of this stuff destroys Republican support among the very voters they need to win elections.
Yeah, unambiguously racist post amplified by the President of the United States about a former President of the United States and a former First Lady of the United States. And I think it's safe to say we can predict this well, that Republicans will say either I didn't see the post or sometimes he just retweets or retruths or whatever, and we can't hold him accountable for all the crazy things he does. And that's just the pattern. But he should be held accountable for that. It's disgusting. It's appalling. And people can go look at it for themselves. And you're right, Joe. I mean, again, normal people look at this stuff. They look at the post last night, or they look at what's happening in the streets of Minneapolis. You can go down the list and they go, I don't want this. This is not. And so I think you saw it even in that poll We saw yesterday about the shooting death of Alex Preddy, where you only had 22% of Americans saying, yeah, we agree with the administration's point of view on this, that it was justified. He was an agitator. 22%. I mean, that's below the MAGA slice of whatever you want to call it, the diehards, 30 to 35%. So he used to have, or often sometimes still does, the president, good political instincts, but to continue to do this stuff and to shed voters, to shed support, Katty K, as we embark here on this election in the fall. And maybe there's a reason he doesn't want to talk about the economy. It's because there was another bad jobs number yesterday, or that, as Steve Ratner showed us in his charts yesterday, just the data that they're putting out, the numbers, the things he's claiming about how strong the economy simply aren't true statistically, factually, and also that most people in the country are not feeling that way about the economy.
Yeah, and the truth is the president can't do very much about the economy. I mean, he can bring in a new Fed chair who could bring down interest rates to try and make things cheaper to some extent for Americans. But there isn't a whole lot that he can do. And he's still running because he still has this fundamental belief, this confusing tariff policy, which is one of the things that has made life increasingly expensive for Americans. So the things he is wedded to, he's refusing to let go, like tariffs and putting up a fortress wall around America in terms of trade, and the other things he can't do very much about. So I think that's why he won't talk about the economy. And then he tries to make a joke out of affordability, but it's a joke that doesn't land because people are still feeling that there are high prices. Again and again, the president goes back to his original playbook. Let's go back to 2020. Let's go back to immigration, because these are tactics that seem to have worked for him before in terms of owning the libs. But even we had the numbers earlier this week, right, guys? Even on immigration, you look at the numbers, 51% say America is less safe because of the immigration policies, and only 22% of Americans, that's smaller than we think his MAGA base is, think that the killing of Alex Preddy is justified. So the policies he thinks are working for him are turning people away. The policies he would like to change, there's not much he can do about.
Well, yeah, and you know, it's one thing for Americans to oppose Donald Trump's immigration policies, and that makes sense from what they're seeing in the streets of Minneapolis and St. Paul. It's quite another. I was really struck by the poll. Did Donald Trump's immigration policies make you safer or less safe? And the majority of Americans say it makes Americans less safe. That's just an absolute stunning, almost shocking turnaround from over the past year. It does. I mean, obviously, you look at the killings, you look at the brutality that Donald Trump's Kristi Noem's forces are engaging in, the secret police. Get the masks off, please. Get the masks off, please.
The weaponry.
Get the masks off and tell them to stop brandishing their guns whenever they get out of their cars. But Americans feel less safe about that when, in fact, the issue that matters is the issue he mugs, which is affordability. And just a couple of quick facts. First of all, jobless numbers came out yesterday. Private surveys showing jobless numbers are spiking, skyrocketing. Secondly, you look at grocery prices. The last measurement we have is from December. Grocery prices jumped up. We're more inflationary in the month of December than any time since 2022. 2022. And so that's what Americans want to talk about, not renaming crappy airports and lousy railway stations, or racist tweets,
reinventing
or
history.
Greenland, or, you know, Venezuela, or all this other stuff, insults at prayer breakfast that are meant to bring people together. That's I would say you're only speaking to your base. But now it looks like in a lot of these polls, you're not even speaking to your 35%. That 35% is becoming 25, 22%. More and more Americans really shocked by what they're seeing.